Okay, everyone, good evening. Thursday night share, which I usually start at 8:30, or should start at 8:30, but I need to do an airport pickup today. So I'm going to do first of all, a very quick share. Hopefully not going to be lacking anything, but condensed. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh, so it's a very special night, and it's a big Yom Tiv. Rosh Chodesh Kislev, the day the Rebbe returned back healthy again in 1977 after his heart attack. 44 years ago, Rosh Chodesh Kislev. So I'm going to teach a Maimah from the Lubavitcher Rebbe himself. Usually Thursday night we usually learn from the earlier Rabbeim, and this one is one that he said right before, which is before Rosh Chodesh Kislev, or he said Erev Rosh Chodesh Kislev. Okay, this one is from the year. The discourse itself was said in Tashel Lamed Aleph. That's before the heart attack in 1970. Here we go. So it's printed in the Teres Menachem, Sefer Memorim, on page Shin Mem Gimel. So he speaks about the dynamics of, he's going to get into the Parsha as well, Parshas Toldos. He's going to talk a little bit about the blessings that Yitzchak blessed Yaakov. The great blessing, we know there was a great contest, Yaakov and Esav, and so on and so forth. So let's read. I'm going to be moving fast today, so I hope you can keep up with me, but hopefully I'm going to give enough explanation. So the Haftorah that we read this year, we're not going to do it because it's Rosh Chodesh tonight. But when Rosh Chodesh comes out on a Sunday, we read a special Haftorah in which it talks about, since it's the day before Rosh Chodesh, on Shabbos, we read the special portion of Navi, where it says that Yonason, who is the king of Saul, says to David HaMelech, King David, that tomorrow you're not going to show up to the feast. Every Rosh Chodesh, Shaul HaMelech made a special feast, and everybody, the royal family, was invited, and David was a son-in-law, so he was also invited. But we know there was a lot of tension between Shaul HaMelech and David. So Shaul says to David that tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh. So Yonason, the son of Shaul, tells David that tomorrow will be Rosh Chodesh. You don't come, and then we'll get to see how my father will react, because you'll be the subject of the discussion. Since you're not there, you'll be mentioned. So that's what he says. Tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh, and if Kadata, you're going to be remembered. Your seat will be vacant. So what is the meaning of that spiritually? That teaches you that vacancy causes remembrance, and that's a deep concept. In addition to the simple meaning that King David was vacant, that he wasn't there, didn't show up. But in a person's spiritual life, that when we reach a state of vacancy and emptiness, which can mean that you transcend your own selfishness and your own beingness, and then you get out of yourself a little bit. So when we talk about getting out of ourselves towards something bigger than ourselves, towards something holier than ourselves. When the recipient surrenders themselves and reaches a point of nullification, that's what it means, vacant. That causes the remembrance above. So, for instance, many times we're all obsessed with our own self. We can be obsessed with our own material goods, with our own material obsessions, feeling good, having a nice time, enjoying ourselves. We can be even obsessed with our spiritual. We can even be obsessed with our spiritual well-being. For instance, obsessed with our own learning, with our own refinement, with our own thing. But sometimes there's a need in which someone else needs help, and it's going to cost us from our own taking care of our own self, even spiritually. We can help other people. We can take care of others. There is a calling, but that's going to cause us to need to compromise in our own time and our own development of self, even. The question is, am I going to be busy with me, or am I going to surrender myself to what God wants me to do, even if it causes me temporarily to let go of my own achievements or my own accomplishments or my own refinement or whatever it is, and let me care about others. So that's the concept of bittul. Bittul means you give yourself over to something else, and something bigger than yourself. And when we surrender to Hashem, our own self and our own self-interest, then we cause Hashem to remember us. And as we draw down God's attention in a very special way. This causes the remembrance above. And we see that in the concept of tomorrow being Rosh Chodesh. When did he say this to him? Yonason says to show tomorrow you'll be vacant. So we know that King David is associated with the moon. That's why we make when we sanctify the moon once a month, we go out and we make a special blessing. We sing David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, because David is the attribute of kingship, which is also the moon. And we know the moon is the recipient. It's a recipient of the light of the sun. The moon and the sun are husband and wife. So the sun shines the light of the moon. The moon is the recipient. So what happens during the month? You have the moon. The moon is present. The moon has a noticeable existence. But then it comes at the end of the Hebrew month, when the end of the lunar month, when the moon disappears. And it's precisely then, after it disappears completely from the sky, she comes back again. But when she comes back better and stronger than she was. It's a new moon. And even though earlier she was declining and getting weaker and weaker and weaker, suddenly she's growing and getting stronger and stronger and stronger. What did it take to flip the moon over from getting smaller and weaker to becoming more powerful and bigger and stronger? It's the nullification where she reached complete non-beingness. It's that point of nothingness that enables, almost like a seed you put in the ground. When can the seed grow into an entire tree? When the seed relinquishes itself completely, when it becomes not, that's when it's precisely then when it can receive the great light. And that's what he's saying. So when the moon disappears completely on the eve of Rosh Chodesh, there's not even left even a tiny dot. There's nothing in the sky. It fades away completely. So the next day becomes Chodesh, becomes a new moon. It means a new moon. Now, what does a new moon mean? The sun remembered the moon. I mean, obviously, this is all metaphorically speaking. That the new moon means that it's not a new moon; it's the same moon that was there before. But it means the moon is now reflecting the light of the sun all over again, which means there is a new attention from the sun to the moon. So, in the case that the sun is referring to God, and we are the moon, so when we sometimes, we as we spoke earlier, be into ourselves, even in a good way, into ourselves. But when we transcend ourselves, which is the idea of the Erev Rosh Chodesh, when we move to a place of non-beingness, precisely at that moment that God shines new light upon us with whole new potential. In order to become something much bigger than ourselves, it takes first being not. Which is the idea of the unification of the sun and the moon. And what does it mean in service? This idea that we spoke about. Through the nullification of the recipient, that creates something new. So the idea of having a new moon, simply the way we look at it scientifically, just from an earthly perspective, there's nothing really new. It has to do with the position of these celestial entities that are up there in the skies, bodies. And so it's the same light as last month. It's just now, to us, it looks like a new light. But spiritually, it really is a new light. Every month, God is shining upon the world a whole new energy, a whole new potential. We are reborn every month again with new light. So to get new light, you have to first come into a state of not. That means, as long as we're holding on to our previous existence, and even if we can expand and grow and develop ourselves more and more and more, it's not a quantum leap. It's always connected to who we were before. Sometimes you meet someone and they're a whole new person. You can't believe what happened to them. How in the world did they go from being like this to become totally metamorphosized, a whole new entity? They've reached such incredible heights, such incredible accomplishments. So you'll know that in all those cases, there always has to be a great, they'll always tell you a story that in between where they were to where they've gotten, they hit rock bottom. It was a moment of completely, or else it's relative. Without a rock bottom, it's a very, very important idea, and it's very, very inspirational to know that, because sometimes we struggle in this darkness and we wonder why. And when God takes us through a darkness, it's because He wants to recreate us on a whole new level. So in order that there should be something new, now, in order for a whole renewal, something totally out of the picture to happen, something completely new, we have to draw down from a place that's higher than what is causing things to be the way they are. In other words, what's the old? The old is the way things are, the system as the system is. So in order to create real news, to have a real newness in our existence or in the world around us, whether it's in the cosmos, whether it's in our own individual lives, to have something totally new means to bring in something that's from beyond the system. That's what he says. In order to create a new, you have to climb up above the system. We learned about this last night in my class called Holy Teachings. We spoke about the number of 515, which is the number transcending the 14 levels of 500, which are the setup of creation. You go above that 15 times, the idea 15 times 500, transcending there to bring down something new, like in our case, for Rebecca to have a child, when according to the system, she couldn't have a child. So in order to bring down from this new higher Keter light, infinite light, that's the idea Keser. It's above the system. That's the idea. In order for there to be something new, we have to draw down from above the whole order. Now, when are we really going to receive new light? He's going to explain that every month we have a little preview of these new bursts of light that are coming, that are like totally new. But really, the real newness, there's nothing new under the sun until Mashiach comes. Until Mashiach comes, everything is just, all development is it's not new. It's all taking what was and what was created on the first day in terms of potential that was there and just actualizing potential. It's nothing really new in creation. When Mashiach comes, God is going to imbue new light and new energy. That's why it says it's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. Totally new. There's going to be a real newness. Because that's when the days of Mashiach is when we're going to really tap. The energy is going to flow from a place that's utterly above the system. That means, as explained in Kabbalah, that in all the amazing moments in all of history where there was incredible infusions of miracles and lights, and even the going out of Egypt, and even the giving of the Torah, and all those giving of the holy and the temple, the building of the temple, all these magnificent things are still related to the external element of the crown. But it's not the internal. It's the idea of the Arizal says it's the external element of the crown, not Pnimius Atik. It's not the inner core of the crown. Only when Mashiach comes will there be revealed the essence of the crown, Pnimius Atik, which means new light. So the real idea of newness is only going to happen at the time of the coming of Mashiach. It'll be a new world. But since everything that happens then is connected to somewhat to what we do today, so in our service, there has to be some kind of a, I don't want to call it an imitation, or some kind of a reflection of this newness. And that's what Rosh Chodesh is. The power of Rosh Chodesh, such a powerful moment, Rosh Chodesh, because the newness of the new moon is in some distant way a little glimmer and a little flash and it's connected to Messianic light, the new light that's going to come upon the world in a grandiose way when Mashiach comes. When, like it's going to be in the future when the creation is going to be all new. Why will it be that way? The flow of energy will come. It's going to be coming from the innermost of the crown. Atik Yom means the ancient of days. So from the inner element of the ancient of days. Because he explains, all that we can pump now, all that we can bring down now, through all the mitzvot and all the good that we do, in which we download and generate and increase godly light, godly flow into the world. According to the Arizal, according to the mystics, it's only from the external element of the crown. That means it's a potential that it was always there, because from the external part of the crown, really, even though we said before crown represents above the whole system, the external part of the crown has somewhat of a connection to the system. So in a very benign beginning of a beginning, anything that's related to the external level of the crown is not really considered new, because it's part of the potential of creation. The real newness is when God is investing from beyond, from his very self, outside of what he initially allocated, even as potential for creation. And that's called the inner element of the crown. So now it's only from Chitzonius Atik. In the future, Atik Mamish will come from the innermost of Atik, literally. Now, what does it have to do with Rosh Chodesh? So he explains. All the revelations that are going to happen in the days of Mashiach Tluyim are all dependent, are dependent on our work during the time of exile. And therefore, when we have a new moon on Rosh Chodesh, which represents the idea of newness, so it's a little glimmer of that newness of the future. Since everything then is dependent on now, we have to have that idea of something new already now. That's why we say when we do Kiddush Levana, we say, the moon, about the moon, we say, this is a remembrance to us that we are going to be renewed in the future like the moon. That means that the renewal of the moon is somewhat a reminder or a reflection of the future light in which is going to be the real and complete renewal. And this idea that there is an event that's in the future, which is only possible in the future. Yet we have little tidbits of it already now. The Medrash draws a very interesting parallel. That when we wake up in the morning, we say Modani, and we acknowledge, and we thank God, and we say Rabba Emunasecha, great is your faith. So according to the Medrash, that idea of Rabba Emunasecha, great is your faith, is our faith. What faith are we talking about? It's Rabba, great is your faithfulness. But what's the faithfulness in what? It's that we every morning get to experience the idea that God, life is eternal. Because you can wake up in the morning and look at life and see how your life is fleeting by. You're getting older. Every day is another day. If one person wants to live in morbidity and sadness, a person can look at every day as them getting closer to the grave. And then they're like closer to your expiration date, which is a scary thought. And that can be very, demoralizing and depressing. So in order that you should be able to embrace the day with energy and light, you think to yourself, no, life on earth doesn't expire. It's actually eternal. There's a temporary break. Death is a temporary break, but then we'll all come back, and that's the idea of the resurrection. Chiyas HaMesim is a resurrection where we're all coming back into this world. So how do we see, and how can we really connect to this resurrection that's going to happen? Like, it's so foreign. What do you mean dead people come back alive? Like, who can believe that? It's so outside of our idea. When we witness it every morning, we have a little bit of death. It says that sleep is a 60th of death. And yet, we wake up and we're fresh and we're new, we're ready to take on a new day. From here we can derive that there's going to be the resurrection. So what we see from here, we are experiencing in the current a little flash of an event of the future. So just like it is regarding to Tchias HaMesim, so it also with the renewal of the moon, the new renewal of the new month. That's related to the general new light that's going to come into the world when Mashiach comes. What it says in the Medrash. The newness of every morning. Great is your faith. The Medrash says, this that a person is renewed every morning, as if you're a new creation. That is great, your faithfulness. This is a little dogma, this is a little comparison, it's a little similar to Tchias HaMesim, to the resurrection. That God is going to enliven the person with the special dew of resurrection. However, the main renewal, the main newness is going to be in the future. And even though we have little bursts of newness today, what we might consider that we can accomplish today to bring something new into the world, it's only relative. It's not the real newness. As he explains in the Torah, that what's the main idea that when Mashiach will come, there will be newness in the world, new light, something new. There will be introduced into the cosmos new souls. The most precious commodity in the world is souls. Souls are the deepest, highest entity. Right? Not the physical creations, but the souls. The souls are the super energy forces, transmissions of God to the world more than anything else. So it's so amazing to bring a new child into the world. Yet we know that the souls that come in now are not considered new souls for a few reasons. Number one, they could be recycled, because we know we're here in many incarnations, so it's not really new. What goes around comes around. This soul could have been around the block already 10 times. And that's most people. We've been around. It's not a new soul. New souls is rare when you get a new soul. But even the new souls that come are not considered really new souls, because they were all part of Adam's soul. Adam was once here. So everybody, even if you didn't come down in your own life, as an individual life, you were once part of Adam Arisha when Adam was here. So real new souls are not going to happen until after Mashiach comes, because then souls that were not part of Adam and Eve, are going to reveal themselves. That means souls that were never in the potential. God is going to reinvest in creation. There's going to be new souls. And even though, but the idea that we're saying earlier, that now we also have similar, but only similar. Even now, now we also have new souls. It's not the real newness. And the real newness is going to be in the future. This idea that it says that tzaddikim are going to be sitting in the days of Mashiach and they're going to have crowns on their heads. It's explained in Chassidus and Makuti Torah, Parashat Tzav, where the Alter explains that the crowns on the head means Hashem is going to crown us with new souls, and those souls are going to empower our souls to spiritual capacity infinitely beyond where we are now. But notwithstanding the idea that the real chidush, the real newness, is only going to be in the future. We have a little similar, we have a little reflection of that now, let's say a little preview of that. When Rosh Chodesh, that's why it's so refreshing, Rosh Chodesh. Because now as well, through and we said, but what is it dependent on? In order to get a new light, you have to first become not. So through the pain and darkness and suffering that happens Erev Rosh Chodesh, suffering, I mean to say, the sometimes a person feels, you don't feel good about yourself. You're all broken and so on and so forth. And we have to always realize that all those experiences they are for much higher than what we think they are, because they create the disintegration of our ego and of self, and then we become vessels, and then we can draw down new light. We reach the level of Eden. Eden is the new lights that are going to come with Mashiach, is the revelation of Eden. That means the energy flow that's flowing into creation from day one of creation until today, until Mashiach, is all coming from the river that goes out of Eden. But not Eden itself. Eden is hidden, and Eden will only be revealed when Mashiach comes. That's Eden. I don't say Eden, but Eden as a spiritual source. It's the innermost of the divine. And that's going to be revealed only when Mashiach. It's called Eden. That's called new. That's where the sages say, when the prophets were prophesying about the future and they said amazing things, that was all what they were able to perceive. That's not Eden yet. That's the revelations of the river. On the highest level, the river on the highest level, the river flowing from Eden, it's going to manifest on the highest level. The river is going to be pumping like crazy in the days of Mashiach. But when we're saying the real newness happens after Mashiach comes, a little later in the time of the resurrection. That's but in the future world, no one has seen that. Zeu Eden. No prophet has seen that's the Eden itself. Okay. So now he's asking, and we need to understand, if what is going to be revealed is Eden, which is so high, what does the verse say? This verse is in Isaiah, Yeshaya, Samach Daled, 64, verse number 3. It says, Ayin Leida Asa, no eye has beholded Elokim Zilasecha, besides God yourself. God is the only one who knows that level. The question he's asking over here, why does he say Elokim? Elokim, we know, is a name of God, as God is already contracted. So if we're talking about such an inner high level, it should have been a higher name of God, which is the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton. We're talking about the innermost revelation. If it's the innermost revelation, it should have said, no eye has seen it. Havaya Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, other than God himself, which is Havaya. That's his more essential name than Elokim is a name, more of an external name. That's his question. Shem Elokim Davka. Why is something so high associated with the name of Elokim? And here is where he connects it to the Parsha. Because now that is that Tzarech Loim Parsha saying, and we need to understand that our Torah portion, Parsha's told us. Because of it says over here, we have this amazing story of Isaac, Yitzchak giving blessings. And when he opens up his blessings to Yaakov, we finally get to the amazing blessings. And we know that these blessings are the highest blessings, because that's why it took so much effort to get them. It had to come through trickery and deception. It couldn't come directly. The Torah makes such a drama out of these blessings because they're the most powerful blessings. They're more powerful than Moses' blessing, Moshe's blessings, more powerful than Jacob's blessings, Yaakov's blessings. The highest blessings are Isaac's blessings. But why does he open it up? He says, V'yitan l'cha, God should give you, but he uses the term V'yitan l'cha Elokim. That Elokim should give you from the fats of heaven and from the from the dew of heaven and from the fats of the earth. A lot of grain and wine. In many places they ask the question, and also in the famous discourse from the year 56, 5666. Masha Elokim. Why does it say Elokim? It should have used the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Especially because it's blessings. We know that in general, Yud Kei Vav Kei, it represents the idea of kindness and compassion, and Elokim is judgment. We're talking about blessings. So when you're bringing it down a blessing, you're bringing it from a flow of kindness, from a flow of revelation. So why are you evoking if you want to punish someone, you're using the name of Elokim. You want to bless someone, the big blessing should be from Yud Kei Vav Kei. We're talking about the blessings of Isaac, Yitzchak. These are the highest blessings. As it's explained in the Siddur of the Alter Rebbe, in the end of the portal of Shofar, where there he explains the uniqueness of the blessings of Isaac. Move on, it's also not understood. Isa Medrash Rabbah. Now the Medrash Rabbah states, Mitala Shamayim Zem Mikra, Mishmane Aretz Zem Mish. The Medrash states that when it says God should give you from the dew of the heaven and from the fat of the earth, it means aside from a lot of a good life with all the material blessings, bountiful blessings in the material, which have to do with the dew of the heaven, which helps the moisture and everything grow, and the fat of the earth, we understand. But in addition to that, it's also alluding to the Mishmane Aretz, the fat of the earth, that's Mishnah, that's the oral law, because that's produced by us. The sages are the ones who teach the Mishnah, Torah Shmo Peh, and that's why it's called the fat of the earth. It comes from us. And Dagon Zu Talmud, and then when it says, Mitala Shamayim, I forgot. From the dew of the heaven is referring to Hashem shall bless you with Chumash, with Mikra, with the scripture. Mishmane Aretz, the fat of the earth, then is the Mishnah. It's the Mishnah. Dagon, then it says, Roiv Dagon, a lot of grain. Zet Talmud, that's you should be blessed. So he's blessing Jacob, Yaakov, he's blessing him with Torah, that he should be blessed to be able to study Torah. Tzarech Lav, we need to understand. What's the idea that he blessed him with Torah? So now he's going to take a little break in the discourse and analyze something else, a new idea. It says over here that Yitzchak is now blessing Yaakov, he's blessing him with Torah. He's going to ask a simple question. What kind of blessing is this? It would seem to imply that had Yitzchak not blessed Yaakov with the Torah, then Yaakov would not have received the Torah. He says it's impossible. The Torah was destined to come to the world no matter what. God created the world for the sake of the Torah. It had to come. Who was going to go to? Who was going to receive? Of course, it was going to be Yaakov. It was going to be the Jewish people. Hashem chose Avram. The whole story is all that this beginning of the path to Yaakov, to the Jewish people that were going to receive the Torah. So what's the whole discussion over here? That he blesses him as he's giving him something, a gift that he never had. I'm buying you a new thing that you would have not got. What do you mean? I'm gifting you with a new thing that you wouldn't have had. It was always destined to come to the world and to the Jewish people. It would have been received, it would have been given to the Jewish people no matter either way. By the giving of the Torah. The whole coming about, the whole intention of creating the world was for the sake of the Torah. The sages said, on the very first verse of the Torah, in the beginning, when God created. So the sages say you have to read Bereshis, not in the beginning, but for two things that are called beginning, God created. The reason he created is Yisrael, for the sake of Israel. Shenikra Reishis, the Jewish people are called Reishis. So Shula Torah, and for the sake of the Torah, Shenikra Reishis, that's called Reishis. So you see from here that the Torah has been etched, and it's part of the planning of creation. And so much as the Torah, part of the story, part of the intention of creating the world, that God initially created the world with the thought of giving the Torah and for the sake of the Torah. But even more than that, he actually made the world dependent on the Torah, that if it would, God forbid, happen, because God doesn't take away free choice, if the Jews would have made a terrible choice and said no to God when he offered them the Torah, then God would have restored the world to nothingness. That's what it says. God made a condition with the world, that your existence is dependent on giving of the Torah. In a manner of a condition, in a manner that he made a condition, which if the condition is not met, it's nullified to begin with. That's how much the world and the Torah go together. The Torah is the condition of the world. The Torah upholds the world. The Gemara says, it says it was evening and day. The sixth day, there's an extra hay over here. I should have said Yom Shishi, Yom HaShishi. So it's saying it's not referring to Friday of creation, it's referring to the sixth day. Shishi is the sixth day of the month of Sivan when God is giving the Torah. Tonight, is the Abishta made it tonight. God made a condition with the world in Yekam Yisrael Torah if the Jewish people receive the Torah. That's why it says also another verse that the world trembled. It's a verse in Tehillim. In Psalms, it says that the earth trembled and then it calmed down. So the sages asked the question, why was the earth, what does it mean it trembled and it calmed down? It says for over 2,000 years, the world was trembling, 2,448 years, because it didn't know if it's going to, if it was on, it was suspended. It was like, it was on, you weren't sure it was going to continue. When God gave the Torah, the world breathed a sigh of relief. Then it calmed down. And if so, the Torah had to be given. And who was it going to be given to? To who? To Esau. To who was it going to be given to? Of course it was going to be given to Yaakov. So what is he giving him now, this great gift? How could there be a blessing on this? That he's giving him a blessing. Either way you're looking at it, it's a problem. He's not going to present two possibilities. One possibility is that he's blessing him to be Yaakov with when he says he blessed him with Torah, his son Yaakov, that Yaakov should learn Torah. If he means, and we know Torah, there's two levels of Torah. The Torah that we have, that our forefathers studied before the giving of the Torah, before Sinai, and then there is after Sinai. And it's a major difference. And we're not going to go into it right now. But the Torah that we study after Sinai is much deeper and much higher than what was studied before. It's much godlier, as we discussed so many times. So now the question is, when Isaac is blessing Jacob, which is before the giving of the Torah, with Torah, was he intending to bless him with the Torah from before Torah, or before Sinai, or after Sinai? And he says in each one of these options is problematic. The Mamonashach. If he's blessing him to be able to study Torah, but in a manner that it was before Sinai, which would make sense because Yaakov is before Sinai, before Har Sinai. Does he need a blessing? They had already. Yitzchak himself was studying Torah, and his father Avram was also studying Torah. So, like grandfather, like father, like son, they're all learning. So, why does he need a special blessing for this? As if he's getting something new that he didn't have. Today, the forefathers had it already. Sages say on the verse that it says Avram was zaken. Old doesn't mean old, but also means the person who's a sage. Avram was a sage. Avram Avinu zaken v'shoyev yeshiva. He was studying in yeshiva. Yaakov Avinu zaken v'shoyev yeshiva. Yaakov was studying yeshiva. So now they had either way. If you're going to then say, no, he blessed him to be able to study Torah like it's going to be after the giving of the Torah. But we can't say that. That he's blessing him with the power of those qualities of Torah that only happened post-Sinai. Well, from the very idea that we say that it only happened post-Sinai is a sign that Yaakov, who was pre-Sinai, didn't have it, even after the blessing. The Torah of the Avos, which in this is included Yaakov also, it was all considered a fragrance compared to the Torah that's after the Torah, which is considered the essence. The giving of the Torah after Torah is considered the essence, and the Torah that they learned earlier is considered a fragrance of it. So that includes even Yaakov. So that special quality Yitzchak didn't have within his capacity of his blessing to give him. So what did he give him? The regular Torah, the pre-Torah, the pre-Sinai Torah, he had already. The post-Sinai Torah, he's not giving him. He can't be giving, because that only happens later. So what is he giving him in his blessing? And the and he gave a very simple answer. It's a very logical answer. Well, he's blessing Jacob, but that's not his intention. He's blessing, his intention is to bless Esau. Since his intention is to bless Esau, that Esau was not meant to get the Torah, So of course Yitzchak knows that Esav, that Yaakov is going to get the Torah, but he wants to give Esav also a piece of the Torah. Why? Because he feels that Esav needs it, to rehabilitate himself, to make a mensch out of himself. He's a total mess. So in order to be able to fix himself, the Torah is very powerful. So he figured if he gives Esav the Torah, and that is a great gift because Esav wasn't meant to get it. So that might be the answer, but he says you can't say so. Well, look, actually, the Torah, you can answer that this was the way Yitzchak was thinking. He wanted to bless Esav. That's why he blessed it with Torah. If he gives him the Torah, then Esav will be able to fix himself up. He'll be able to make himself into a mensch. Well, Esav, there's no question. You can bless him with the Torah, because even though the Torah is meant to come to the world, it was meant to come to the Jewish people, not to Esav. The Torah is only for the Jewish people. So this would be a good answer. In the end, it's not understood. This is a good explanation for the psychological explanation of what's going on in Yitzchak's mind. But if this is the case, then this entire blessing was totally futile or unnecessary. Yaakov makes such a great deal to go grab these blessings, risks his life, literally. He was afraid his turn the father would curse him. And he goes and if he gets busted. And he goes and he pretends he's Esav and he goes and he tricks him in order to get these awesome blessings. And what is he getting? Something that he has already. He doesn't need it. So therefore you can't say so. In the end it was given to Yaakov. He took his blessing. We make such a big deal that he got those blessings, which is something that he had already. What's the blessing? And it's such an amazing answer. And this has to do with the whole idea of tomorrow's Chodesh. Knew the idea is as follows. The Torah, as it was given by the giving of the Torah, is the Torah as it stands on its own. But the blessing of Yitzchak, Yitzchak is giving Yaakov an incredible power. He's empowering him to be able to squeeze out of the Torah new ideas that were not there before. What he's blessing him is he's giving him the empowerment to toil in the Torah. So there's amazing ways of studying. We can study, and there's so much in Torah. You can take books and you can learn, and you can read, and by reading you extract information. You study, you learn, you extract information. And naturally, our inclination is to study light. No one likes to work too hard, so you work and you gain insight and understanding. But the real way of studying Torah is to toil and think and break your head, and then you come out with such a deep understanding, and then you innovate new ideas. You bring forth incredible new light. That's called the toiling in Torah. And that's what, up until this time, Yaakov did not study Torah that way. Not Yaakov, not Avram, not Isaac. They didn't have that ability. And this was the blessing that he gave, the blessing to toil. What's the greatness of toiling? When you toil, you uncover. Toiling brings you to a place of nothingness. That's the idea. Toiling is it. You break until you reach a point where you're so frustrated. You think you're pained by it. It's like the disintegration of the seed. In that nothingness, what you're opening up to is such boundlessness, such incredible light that you were never a vessel to it before. It's from a whole new level. The same idea that we spoke about earlier, new light, new revelation. That it says in the pasuk that the great reward that's going to come in the future, it says God will give it to those that are hoping for him. The Zohar says that it doesn't mean just hoping for salvation, hoping for Mashiach. It means the people that toil in Torah, deeply in Torah. Isa Zohar, the Zohar says, in the dakin, the middle of the chokhmasa. These who squeeze ideas of Torah, of chachma, of wisdom, but they don't take things externally on face value. They're not lazy. They take any concept of Torah, and study it by deeply analyzing and meditating in it stronger and probing it to its depth. And just like it is in the physical, in our psychological experience, that whenever you toil on something, you really get to understand it on a whole new level. The same is also in the spiritual light that's in the Torah, the godly light that's in the Torah. That by drilling, taking a heavy drill and drilling deep into the Torah, we uncover new powerful veins of the earth, new water, new light, a whole new source that was never revealed before. And he explains how it is spiritually. The Torah as it stands on its own, the Torah as it flows naturally is from God's wisdom. And if we're not, and obviously even to apprehend God's wisdom through study of Torah requires, of course, great devotion of the mind. But we're talking beyond that. We're talking about literally reaching superhuman levels. So what he's saying is when we do that, we reach beyond God's mind even. That's the idea. We introduce from the essence of God, which is higher than even the mind of God. If you trace the Torah really back to its origins of origins, it's a level of potential wisdom, but it's still wisdom. It's the potential wisdom in God. Obviously, we're talking about potential. It's so high, but yet it's still wisdom. But when one toils and breaks himself or herself completely in trying to understand, then you go deeper than even the potential of wisdom in God into the divine essence and reveal new light. And through the toil we reach Eden. No eye has ever seen it. It's completely transcending Chachma. Now we'll understand. So obviously that is something that Yaakov didn't have. So Yitzchak is empowering him with that ability to toil in Torah and reach the Torah as it is, even deeper than what the Torah is in God, even higher than that, to uncover and draw down new light. But this will also, so that is something new that Yaakov didn't have. So this will go back to what we were talking about in the beginning. We're talking about when Mashiach will come, there'll be a revelation of a new light, and there will be, right? And every Rosh Chodesh, there's a little bit of that flash, of that newness. What triggered that? How do we get to that? Well, we said earlier, Erev Rosh Chodesh, you have to come to disintegration. So how does one disintegrate? Sometimes it has to do with going through hard times and difficulties in life and that crush us and so on. Sometimes it has to do by us devoting ourselves beyond our powers towards goodness. As we spoke earlier, getting out of ourselves to help others, even if it's compromising on ourselves. But at other times, it's simply pushing ourselves in Torah study to the point that we're exhausted beyond exhaustion, and we go deeper and deeper. And through toil in Torah, is through that we bring that new light that's going to be revealed when Mashiach comes. So now we'll also understand another idea, that when Yitzchak wanted to give his blessing to Esav, now generally we know that Esav was in a very messed up state. And Esav is the klipa. He represents the unholy. And what kind of unholiness is compared to the pig? And we know that within the unholy, there's two levels. There is the ordinary klipa called klipas noga, which is a mixture of good and bad, but it's a type of klipa that is fixable, it's repairable. And there's a dark klipa, which all non-kosher animals derive their energy from that place. It's called the three impure klipot, and from that place it is irreparable. Can't fix it, can't rectify. The Torah doesn't allow. That's why you can't eat pig or other non-kosher things and then say, I'm going to rectify it, I'm going to use the energy in a good way. Can't do it. Why can't you do it? And here, when Yitzchak wants to bless Yaakov, doesn't Yitzchak know this? So how can Yitzchak want to bless Esav and give him power to repair himself by giving him the Torah, which from the Torah itself, the Torah doesn't allow for the repair of the pig. Or else the Torah would allow you to make a barbecue with a pig. Use a pig on a barbecue and eat it and use the energy for good. From this, the Torah doesn't allow you to do it. That means that Esav, whose embodiment of the pig, who is not repairable. So what is Yitzchak giving him the Torah to fix him? The Torah doesn't leave room for fixing. The answer is, depends which Torah. The Torah, as it is the divine wisdom, has limits, and it can only repair certain things. And certain things, it says it's outside of the limit of repairing. You have to leave it, you have to let go of it. But when you toil in Torah, You uncover the essence. On that level, everything could be repaired. From that level of depth, there's no such a thing of a limitation. And then you can repair even Esav. And now we'll understand, since the blessing that Yitzchak was blessing Yaakov, which he thought was Esav, wasn't with Torah, but with going even beyond potential of Torah. Toiling in Torah, which opens up the Torah level so deep. On that level, Esav can also receive it, and Esav can use it to fix himself, because even Esav could be repaired. That's so awesome. How does this work? But through this, that Yitzchak blessed Yaakov with the toil of Torah, and the truth is, not just that he wanted to give it to Esav to fix himself. In the end, who did he give it to? He gave it to Yaakov. And when he gave it to Yaakov, did Yitzchak's intention to fix Esav fall to the side? Okay, didn't work. He wanted to fix Esav, then he gave it to Yaakov. So let Esav not be fixed. No. When he gave the blessings to Yaakov, unbeknown to him, he's actually realizing what he desired. And what did he desire? He wanted to fix Esav. He's going to fix Esav. Because through Yaakov toiling in Torah, Yaakov is now empowered to fix even the pig, to fix even Esav. For him to rectify even Esav. Since through toiling in Torah we reach Eden, okay, that's why you can fix not only the klipa of noiga, elegamani tzutzis, you can even fix the sparks that are in the three impure klipas. And Ruben has explained elsewhere, that Yaakov says, I lived with Lavan, and 2 weeks from now, when he's sending messengers to Esav, meaning he says, I'm ready to fix you, Esav, too. I kept the Torah and I'm ready. How is he ready to take on Esav? The answer is because he toiled in Torah. That's when he completed fixing Lavan, which is the easier part of the world to fix. And he went to rectify even Esav. Yaakov was already ready for Mashiach and to fix Esav. Yaakov and Yaakov was actually finished it. It's just only that Esav wasn't on the same page yet. And this is all through the powers of toiling of Torah. It basically teaches us an amazing thing. How powerful we become when we toil in Torah. How powerful, enormously powerful we become spiritually. Because even things that are totally impossible before, now we get that it becomes within range. Because we're tapping the very essence. This will also explain why it says the name of Elokim. So it's just literally, quickly, I'm going to read this because I want to finish the whole Ma'amar. The Torah, as it was given, there was no forgetting. That the ruchas were engraved. The sages say, that's why you didn't have to have toil. See, initially, when the Torah was given to us, the first luchot, and he's going to explain that's the difference between the first luchos and the second luchos, first tablets and second tablets. First tablets, one didn't have to toil because you learned something and you remembered it, and with having all the information, it was, you basically knew the Torah. The toiling has to do now mainly because we forget, and then we need to relearn, and so on and so forth. But what was the work then? The only thing they needed to do is speak Torah. Moshe downloaded, he taught it to them, and then all they had to do is just speak it. And now he explains, why did they have to speak? When God spoke to Torah, he also did it in speech. I'm sorry, I'm not going to explain so well over here. It's a little parenthetical, and I want to finish, and I have to leave literally in 3 minutes, so I'm just going to read it quickly over here. It would have been enough in thought. In order to remember it, you have to speak it. That's only after the second luchas where there's a potential for forget. There's forgetfulness in the world. The reason why you had to have speech was not because you shouldn't forget, because before the Torah was in its original form, there was no forgetting. Torah is compared to fire, that's why. And just like fire, when it's in a coal, it kind of gets quiet. And then when you need a fan, you need to blow on it and fire comes out. Same is true with Torah. Torah needs words. It's not enough to think Torah. Why isn't it enough Torah, just thinking Torah. You have to supposed to, when you learn Torah, you're supposed to sing it and speak it, because you need the ear of the mouth, and that blows the fire, brings godliness into a revealed way in the world. Okay, the but the novelty of the blessing of Yitzchak, speech in Torah needs to reveal Torah down here in this world. It's what speech does. And needed even without that's the Torah that they studied before Yitzchak's blessing. Yitzchak is blessing a whole new reality. He's blessing to Toiling Torah. That enables a much higher rectification. We can fix even Asa. These are the sparks that are in the darkest elements. That's what we read. That's when we can fix Asa as well. And that's why we mentioned the name of Elokim. This is the last point. There's two levels of Elokim. There's one level of Elokim. Elokim is the level of concealment, but there's two levels of concealment. There's a level of concealment that comes through a cover, a concealing cover. There's a level of concealment that comes, it's not a cover, it's concealed because it's too deep to be revealed. It's a concealment that's higher than light. It's essence. Essence is concealed. Since the whole blessings of Yitzchak was the revelation of essence, toiling so you can reach the essence, he doesn't use the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, because the Yud Kei Vav Kei is the name of expression, revelation. He's using the name of Elokim, but over here Elokim is higher than Yud Kei Vav Kei. Elokim of the essence, the concealment of the essence. God should give you the ability to reach Elokim, the quintessential essence of Hashem, and from there draw the Torah from that place. Comes from the highest place. This will also explain why when Mashiach comes, it says, Ayin Elokim Zelasech. The revelation that we're going to have when Mashiach comes, the new light comes from the innermost of the crown, is from the level of Elokim. No ayah, only Elokim sees it because we're dealing with the essence. That's the gist of the mind, the incredible new light and revelation that we reach through toiling, through this powerful breaking ourselves beyond ourselves. Chaim on the bracha of Yom Tov and Agut Chodesh.